Hey guys, in today's video you will learn the story of Jonathan Miller, an American businessman who died for a few minutes and returned with a shocking revelation from Jesus. Not all tithes are accepted in heaven. What he saw on the other side will shake his certainty about faith and offerings. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell and comment below which city you are watching. Now get ready, because this experience will move you inside. My name is Jonathan Miller. I have 59 years old, I'm a businessman, and I've lived my whole life in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in church, literally. My parents were respected leaders, the kind people greet with reverence in the hallways of the congregation. At the age of 12, I was already helping to organize services. At 20, he was already giving lectures on prosperity. At 40, my name was among the largest donors in my denomination. In 2022 alone, I donated more than $300,000. They called me God's banker. I said I didn't care about the compliments, but I loved it. Sincerely, I thought I had credit with heaven. That was buying blessings with the tithe. When my daughter got sick, I tripled the offerings. When my business faced a crisis, I ran financial sacrifice campaigns. One pastor even said, "Jonathan, God never forgets a faithful tither." And I believed, but I was deeply deceived. The truth found me at the worst possible time. It was one morning in my car, returning from another service where I left a generous check at the altar. I parked in front of the coffee shop where I usually drink my coffee. Everything was normal, and until my vision went dark, my chest burned as if it had been pierced by a hot iron. The steering wheel disappeared from my hand. The breath disappeared from my lungs. I felt like I was dying there inside the car with the Bible on the passenger seat and my pocket empty from giving so much. What happened next is why you're listening to this now. Because what did I see? They didn't give it to me in Sunday school. And what I heard from Jesus broke my soul. Get ready, because the tithe that I thought was saving me was exactly what was condemning me. I didn't feel my heart stop. I heard. It was as if a door had been violently ripped out of my chest. For a few seconds, everything was silent. No pain, no sound, just one absolute emptiness. And then, as if I had been pulled by an invisible whirlpool, I felt my body sinking, but my consciousness rising. The first thing I noticed was the frozen time. My body was still there, slumped in the car seat, the door open, my legs dangling, but it was no longer there. He saw me from above, and for the first time in my life I had no control over anything. I tried to scream, but my mouth was gone. I tried to move my arms, but there were no arms. It was as if I were made of nothing but thought and fear. A different fear. It wasn't fear of death. It was fear of discover that my whole life I had believed a lie. It was then that the environment around me changed drastically. From an ordinary parking lot, I was transported, not walking, not floating, but simply standing, to a place that seemed made of golden smoke, bright light, and total absence of human sounds. But there was someone, a presence that crushed me even without touching me. The atmosphere was dense, filled with true, but not that truth that comforts. It was a truth that tears, which confronts, which reveals. And then the voice came. It was no ordinary voice. It didn't ring in the ears. She invaded inside. Each word reverberated in my spirit like thunder inside an empty temple. "Jonathan, you gave so much, but you withheld everything I really wanted." Those words were like knives without handles. I wanted to ask, what? But before I formed the thought, a living wall of light opened before me, and that wall was like a mirror of the soul. In it, I started seeing scenes, my scenes, handing over checks with fake smiles, shaking hands with pastors with looks of vanity, helping people, but looking around to make sure they saw me, praying but just repeating beautiful phrases to maintain the spiritual image. I saw my faith and sacrifice campaigns that were actually spiritual blackmail. I saw my arrogance hidden behind believers' clothes, I saw my faith being treated like investment and the tithe as return guarantee. And then the voice said something that made me cry, even without eyes. You made my altar a transaction, a contract, a currency. But I was never for sale. At that time I broke. There was no floor, but I wanted to fall. There was no body, but I felt as if every part of who I was collapsing in shame. What came next was even worse. Because Jesus, he showed me what happens to offers that don't come from the heart. Do you want to see what I saw? I was there, in front of that indescribable presence, feeling naked without being undressed, ashamed without being accused. And then before me, the wall of light has changed. By reflection, it became a window. And what I saw through her, it was the most brutal shock of my spiritual life. It was as if I was looking at the sky, but not the sky of fluffy clouds and angels playing harps. No, it was a sacred environment, living, breathing glory. But there, right before the heavenly altar, I saw something repulsive. Heaps and mounds of envelopes floated in the air. There were letters, checks, banknotes, all sealed with phrases like purpose, campaign of faith, seed of miracle. But none of them glowed. None went up. None were accepted. They hovered like suspended garbage, waiting for something that would never come. And then Jesus spoke, and it was not a parable. It was a verdict. These are the offerings that did not go up. They were given with the hands, but without the heart. I wanted to look the other way. I didn't want to see. But there, no one looks away. No one runs away from the truth. I saw people I knew. I saw envelopes with my name on them. They were there, heavy, dark, rejected. I tried to argue. I wanted to say, but I gave in faith. But the answer came before the thought. I was afraid. Fear of losing control. Fear of not getting it back. Fear of not being seen as faithful. That one destroyed me. I spent my life saying that I offered out of love, that tithing was a privilege, that sowing was an honor. But the naked truth, which only that place could reveal, was that what I called faith was anxiety disguised as spirituality. And Jesus continued. Many have turned tithing into an amulet, a spiritual insurance, a silent contract. I give, you protect me. But the kingdom doesn't work by exchange, it works by surrender. That word, surrender, echoed like a hammer on stone. I had never surrendered. I investee, you negotiation, you commit, but I never surrendered. I never delivered, without expecting anything in return. It was then that the scene changed once again. I saw cults, altars full of envelopes, excited pastors, people crying while offering. But above all that, I saw the hearts behind the hands. Some glowed. Others were dark caves of pride and bargaining and fear. And Jesus said, not every altar belongs to me. Not every offering is perfume, and not every tithe reaches the throne. That phrase went through me with such force that even there, outside my body, I felt as if my spirit was bleeding. I wanted to go back in time. I wanted to tear up every envelope, every campaign, every vote made out of convenience. But it was too late. There was no more hiding it. I had used God's name as an investment brand. And the worst, I wasn't the only one. Want to know what I saw next? Because what was shown to me afterwards involves known people, shepherds, and even miracles. Counterfeit. The scene before me seemed impossible. I was seeing with the eyes of the Spirit what would never be shown in a Sunday pulpit. It was as if the veils fell one by one and hidden truth of the modern church was revealed without censorship, without mercy, without makeup. I saw a cult. It was one of those big events, a lit stage, a standing crowd, loud music, an atmosphere full of emotion. The pastor, a well-known, even famous face among those who appear at international conferences, held a golden microphone, and beside him a table full of envelopes with prophetic tithes, as he called them. People were crying. Many knelt down to deliver their offerings. Cameras broadcast live to the world. They shouted, "Hallelujah, glory, Today is my day of victory, but there, outside the earthly dimension, I saw the invisible. I saw the angels moving away. I saw the sky in silence. I saw the altar as a facade, and behind, what was supposed to be holy turned into a spiritual market. Jesus was by my side. His presence was strong, but different from what I expected. There was no anger, but also there was no joy. It was a silent pain, a lament from those who love and see their children playing with what is sacred. They exchange me for promises. They use my name to activate blessings they themselves created. They seek me with adulterated intentions. His words fell like silent thunder, and then he pointed. I saw a man being healed at the altar. He threw his cane in the air, ran, cried. The church erupted in applause, but there, in the spiritual dimension, there was no cure. I saw a demon laughing, hiding behind the stage. Was a staged cure, a hoax created to increase offers. Jesus looked at me, and it was as if I heard his thoughts. Where there is a hunger for power, there is room for deception. I was shaking, inside, on the outside, completely. I wanted to scream, "Lord, why don't you stop this?" But before my indignation took shape, he replied firmly, "Because they don't want the truth. They want results. They don't come to me to be transformed, but to be promoted." I wanted to close my eyes, but that wasn't possible. I was forced to see everything you never wanted to see. People giving away cars, selling houses, getting into debt to fulfill vows, all in the name of a faith that promised a return. And the saddest thing, they thought they were pleasing God. I saw how the offers went up, or didn't go up. I saw envelopes fly toward the light and disappear like smoke. Others, however, fell like stones, straight to the spiritual ground, without even being noticed, by the sky. Jesus then spoke once again. They learned to use tithing as a key, but they forgot that the kingdom opens with surrender. At that moment I understood that what I thought was spirituality was just religion packaged to sell, and the tithe, a sacred symbol that had been prostituted by ambition. But what shocked me most was what I saw about myself. There, in that place where nothing is hidden and all masks fall, Jesus showed me something that devastated me more than any previous vision. The image I had of myself, and who I really was in the eyes of heaven. I thought I'd seen the worst, the rejected offers, the staged miracles, the corrupted intentions. But when he turned his eyes to me, not as judge, but as truth incarnate, I collapsed. The wall of light moved again, now revealing my own private cults. Not the public ones, with claps and microphones, but the secret ones. Those moments when I was alone with God, or thought I was. I saw scenes of me praying in the early hours of the morning, crying, fasting, making vows. But around those images there was a sound that hurt more than any words, the sound of my own hidden thought. "Lord, look what I've done. Look how much I've given. Now you need to answer me." Jesus just looked, in silence. But inside me, an old wound opened. All those times I handed over stuffed envelopes hoping for a blessing the next day. All the campaigns I did, not out of love, but out of desperation. All the praises I sang with my mind stuck in bills to pay. Everything was exposed. I was not a faithful tither. I was the investor of faith. And then he said something that seemed to tear my soul from the inside out. "Jonathan, your allegiance was not to me. It was to the blessing." It was like falling into an abyss of consciousness. I didn't serve God. I served the idea of a God who owed me something. All my obedience was a bargain. All my generosity was spiritual blackmail, masked as zeal. That moment, Jesus approached. Its light was no longer sharp. It was warm, like a fire that purifies. And then he said with a voice that penetrated what I didn't even know existed in me, "You never trusted me. You trusted the system, the routine. The religion, but never me. I cried, not with tears because he had no eyes, but with spirit. It was a dry, deep, desperate cry. Because there I realized that everything I thought I was doing for love was for fear of losing control. You said I was the Lord, but you always wanted to be the owner of the promise. Those words destroyed my castle of faith built on sand. There was nothing left to defend. I was naked, undressed, unmasked, and it was then that Jesus said something to me that it would forever change my view on tithing. You gave what you could see, but withheld what I wanted most. I was shaking. If I had a body, I would be in tears. But there, in the spiritual world, pain doesn't need eyes or tears. She simply she occupies everything. And at that moment, after hearing from Jesus that I had given what I could see, but withheld what he really wanted, a holy silence took over the environment. The light around it pulsed as if it were alive. And it was then that he said, "You gave me grades, but you never gave me the invisible treasure." I didn't understand right away. And he, like a patient teacher, began to show me. I saw scenes from my childhood, of the boy who prayed kneeling by the bed before knowing what tithing was, before knowing what theology was. Before the performance, there was purity. I saw my adolescence, when I hid in the church bathroom to cry, afraid I wasn't good enough. I saw it when I prayed, alone, saying, "God, I just want to please you." And then I saw, like a dry cut, when everything became a system. When my heart it was exchanged for spiritual goals. Jesus said, "What I expected from you was your heart without a mask, your worship without calculation, your faith without a contract." I understood. The treasure that heaven awaited it was not the tithe, it was sincere delivery. That place inside me that surrendered without demanding guarantees, that I loved without expecting a return, that he gave without expecting recognition, what I loved without conditions. And then he said, "You offered with numbers, but withheld your brokenness." It was like being overwhelmed by glory and truth at the same time. I thought tithing was protection, that generosity was spiritual insurance, that giving more was the key to blessing. But at that moment I realized that God not impressed with the value of hands, but with the state of the heart. And it was then that Jesus asked me a question. "Jonathan, if I gave you nothing else, would you still love me?" I didn't know how to answer. There, exposed before the living light, I realized I was not prepared to love God without benefits. And that hurt more than any conviction. Most people don't deliver what I want most. It's not the gold, it's the broken heart, the repentance, the unadorned truth. It was at that moment that a new vision was shown to me, something that will leave you breathless. Jesus took me to a place where tithers really faithful are received, and what I saw, it's not what religion teaches. The light began to move, as if obeying a silent order from the sky itself, and then the environment has completely changed. I was taken to a place that I cannot explain in human words. It was simple, but filled with a majesty that not even 1,000 cathedrals together could reproduce. I saw a garden, but not like the ones here. Every leaf, every flower, every particle of light there seemed alive, conscious, pulsing in continuous adoration. It was as if everything in that place I knew I belonged to God and was happy to just share. Jesus said to me, "Here, I receive the offerings that rise like perfume. Here are stored the invisible seeds, those that were planted with pain, but with truth." And then I saw something that made my spirit tremble. I saw people, face of common people, simple women, humble men, children even, none famous, none that I have seen on stage. They were there, standing like columns of soft light sincerity dresses, and at his feet, there was something extraordinary. Golden fragments floated around them. Jesus revealed to me, These are the offers that went up. It wasn't gold. They weren't checks. They were memories, feelings, motivations. These were moments of surrender, made in anonymity, in silence, without an audience, without camera, no likes. I saw a woman who handed over her last coin smiling, even though she didn't know how she would feed her children the next day. But her heart was surrendered, not desperate. I saw a young man who gave just $1, but he did so with tears of gratitude, not because he wanted blessings, but because he recognized that I had already received everything in Christ. And Jesus looked at me with the most serene eyes I have ever seen and said, "They never tried to buy me. They just wanted to love me." My chest hurt, because there, in the place where the true offers are saved, you didn't see me. There was no fragment of me there. None of my campaigns, my generous checks, my votes at very expensive conferences. Nothing. You gave a lot, Jonathan. But almost everything was exchange. What is love goes up, what is interest in weighs down. I couldn't answer, but Jesus knew. The glory of that place was not made of gold or power. It was made of surrendered hearts, people who preferred to be faithful in pain than rich in appearance. People who gave not because they expected the miracle, but because it was already a miracle to be alive. And then, he asked me the question that would change everything. So, you want to learn how to really give? I didn't hesitate. Yes, Lord, teach me. Because now, I know that I don't know anything. And that's when he took me to the darkest place of my journey, a place no one wants to enter, but everyone needs to pass through. I answered yes to Jesus, not knowing what it would cost me. Little did I know that this yes would lead me to most feared place in my entire spiritual existence. It was as if the sky closed for an instant, and the light around it retreated like a trapped breath. And then, without warning, I was cast into a dark place. It wasn't hell, but it wasn't heaven either. It was what Jesus called the valley where intentions are judged. Everything there was gray, arid. There were no demons, no fire. But there was something worse. The silence of God mixed with the weight of everything we hide even from ourselves. But what are you inside takes shape before you. And what I saw crushed me. Facing me, a figure appeared. It was me. But not the Jonathan of the photos, the services, the conferences. It was a Jonathan deformed, swollen with pride, overflowing with vanity, with eyes of anxiety and hands shaking with control. He held a Bible, but his lips were stained with murmurs. In his shirt pocket, several envelopes, all marked with phrases like, "to secure my blessing," "to protect my family," "to unlock promises." Jesus said, "This is the version of you that lived under the guise of faith." I cried, I screamed, but there was no echo, because there is no audience, there are no excuses, there is no cult. There is only raw truth. I tried to escape that image of myself, but every time I ran, she came back in front of me. And that's when I understood. That valley is not a prison, it's surgery. That's where the sky cut away everything that prevents the offer from being sincere. Jesus spoke, with a firm but compassionate voice. Most of those who offer today have this spiritual appearance, deformed by unconfessed intentions. They think they are offering to me, but they are trying to pay for a fear they have never faced. That phrase stuck with me. How many times have I offered out of fear of illness? For fear of the crisis? For fear of appearing unfaithful? I called it faith, but it was panic disguised as spirituality. And then, that corrupted version of me began to melt, like wax before the fire. Meanwhile, Jesus said, "You can only deliver something pure when you are willing to let what is false die." I fell. Even without a body, I prostrated myself. There, in the spiritual dust of truth, I said in thought, Lord, I don't want to pay you anymore. I want to love you. Teach me to be real. And he replied, so now, I can give you what you always wanted but never deserved. There, kneeling in the dust of my soul after seeing my pride melt before the living truth, I prepared myself to be rejected. Part of me thought Jesus would say, now you've seen it. Now go away. But it was precisely at that moment, when I was more broken, more devoid of any argument, at which he approached with a look that no human being could sustain. Jonathan, now you're ready. Not to give, but to get to know me. These words passed through me like liquid light. And then he held something out to me. It was not an object. It was like a floating flame, soft, bluish, alive, throbbing. As soon as it touched my spirit, I knew what it was, not by logic, but by revelation. Era grace. But not the grace I preached in Bible studies. Not that memorized theological definition. Unmerited favor. Era living grace. Presence of God in pure form. Acceptance not by merit, but by surrender. Jesus said to me, this, no tithe can buy. No campaign can activate, no human altar can release. It is only born when the heart gives itself without reservation. At that moment, I was filled with a love that doesn't charge, that doesn't negotiate, that doesn't depend on performance. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything to God. I just existed before him. And that was enough. I felt layers of religiosity peeling away from me like old shells. All the rehearsed speech, all the fear of making mistakes, all the desire to be seen as a man of faith. Everything was ripped away. And in return, I received something that no money can buy, peace with God. Jesus continued, heaven does not recognize numbers. Heaven recognizes truth. And then, as if a portal opened before me, he showed me my life. Starting over. I saw myself returning to the world of the living, but with new eyes. I saw my hands holding envelopes, but this time, no rush. I saw my heart offering with tears, but not out of fear or exchange, out of gratitude. You didn't come back to collect more. You came back to free others who, like you, are still trapped in a gospel of barter. Those words were a call, a mission, one send. I knew that if I came back, nothing would be the same again. And then, Jesus spoke one last time before I left that place. I don't want your tithe. I want your whole heart. The tithe will be a consequence, not a currency. It was then that everything started to get dark. But unlike the first time, there was no fear, there was a mission. And when I opened my eyes in the hospital, the world was the same, but I was no longer that man. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video. And help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.